Yeah, some cocksucker. Some fucking cocksucker.
I hope you find some peace of mind in this lifetime.
Tell them the truth.
I hope you find some paradise.
Tell them the truth. Tell them you're...
I've been going through something. 1,855 days. I've been going through something. Be afraid.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's Monday, it's Tuesday, whatever day, it's whatever day. Who cares, man? You know what I'm saying? The sun, is the sun up or is it not up? Are you alive? That's really where you got to start.
I know what God really wants, damn it. He wants me to kill my motherfucking self. That's why he fucks with me. That's why he gave me a fucked up ass life. But the joke's on him. I ain't gonna give that motherfucker the satisfaction.
Do you know what percentage of people die, smokers die of lung cancer?
What percentage?
10 to 15%.
Am I alive? Okay.
That's crazy.
Isn't that low? I've looked it up repeatedly. Like, am I misreading this? The amount of smokers that die of lung cancer is 10 to 15%.
Studies found the risk of developing lung cancer increases to 14% if you smoke cigarettes. If you smoke 1 to 5 cigarettes per day, your risk is around 7.7%. And if you smoke more than 35 cigarettes a day, you have a 26% chance of developing. Well, that's a lot.
That's 35
by
cigarettes.
80, though, by 80.
Yeah, I know.
That's like a whole lifetime of smoking 35. What is that, a pack and a half?
Yeah, almost two.
Yeah.
Is two packs 40?
Yeah.
20 in a pack.
Wow. 26%.
2 packs is
That's
still
3
only...
out of 4.
Yeah.
Then, well, let's go.
I don't think I will have a career after this.
Jamie, go to the videotape.
Accused of faking his own stabbing outside of a West Bloomfield synagogue, and that's not the only lie police say he told officers. Coco McAvoy live in West Bloomfield tonight, and Coco, as it turns out, it was his Apple Watch that helped police crack the case.
Yes, that's right. Detectives were able to use the watch to help determine that he made up the entire story, and now he's been charged with a crime here at 48th District Court. A twisted tale landed Sean Samet in big trouble. Police say he made up an elaborate story about being attacked for his Jewish faith.
During the assault, he stated that the suspect was kind of ranting anti-Semitic rhetoric.
But police say the assault never happened. Samet claimed he was attacked outside of the Temple Polemi in West Bloomfield, where he worked.
He stated that he had attempted to fight off the attacker and in the process was stabbed in the abdomen area.
Juicy Smouillet is a very famous French actor.
Police took it seriously and started investigating.
We immediately brought in detectives, brought in our canine dogs. We canvassed the neighborhood looking for, the suspect.
But police say Samet's Apple Watch told on him.
The app told us that it was inconsistent with the time frame that he laid out to us initially.
The West Bloomfield detectives often use technology to crack cases, including Apple Watches.
That, we can look at cell phones and computer forensics.
Yeah, this person's never going to be famous.
Hopefully I'll be on the news one day.
One minute you think it's a comedy, next minute it's an emotional journey, then it's got sort of a thriller aspect to it, but then it's quite mystical.
Yeah, that's what I do, it's my job. I like to say that if you're seeing me, you're having the worst day of your life.
Social media is social media, and there's a whole lot of crazy things that happen from it, but also there's a lot of good that happens from social media. I don't think people would understand a lot of the realities in the world today without social media. The veil has been lifted on a whole bunch of narratives that we've been forced to support for a very long time because of social media, which is why now governments in the West are panicking and passing laws trying to censor and stop social media free countries, democracy, free speech. Oh, no, 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 not when you say what we don't like. So now they're coming along and trying to stop it all.
Usually, I'm just kidding. But usually, you have to wait a long time to find out how toxic some shit like this actually is. Not with this show.
I mean, I'll work harder.
Get ready.
No, I don't think that's going to do it.
We love trans people.
I don't know what this is supposed to be.
It's honestly super frustrating when you post a video and you only get around 200 views, but you know that your content could go viral. You just need the chance.
I don't know. Stop asking me.
It's not a real thing. It's an idea.
How you doing? What's your name? Never mind. Pull up on me in Atlanta. When you hear what I'm putting down, gon' get excited. Shit, your fans might need to bring a pamper. Cop a ticket, fucking cop FOMO. Bring your granny with her knees on swole. Shaking her thigh, figure out what better I wing it up on my stage. Watch it all unfold. Ho, ho. Pick it up, fuck that, don't put down.
Euphoria. Them superpowers get neutralized. I can only watch in silence. The famous actor we once knew is looking paranoid and now spiraling. You're moving just like a degenerate. Every antic is feeling distasteful. Why calculate? You're not as calculated. I can even predict your angle. Fabricate stories on the family front.
For the last 31 years, the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, has been bringing together an unprecedented mix of global, political, and business leaders. Next January, for the first time in its history, the forum will hold its annual meeting not in Davos, but in New York City. Klaus Schwab is the founder and president of the World Economic Forum. I'm pleased to have him at this table for the first time. Welcome. It ought to be said that you and I, just to take note, people always say, where were you? And
that's right.
You and I were having breakfast in New York on September 11th.
And afterwards it happened. I was visiting some friends to prepare our annual meeting and heard about it.
You have announced that you're going to take the, what's now called Davos, the World Economic Forum, to New York City. Why?
I think it's very symbolic. When you, for several reasons. First, it's an act of solidarity. This city and the American people have had such a tremendous tragedy to suffer, and I feel the world has to be behind them. We should try to develop a long-term vision. How will the world look like in the coming years?
Like, what are you doing? Like, what the fuck is going on here? We're just basically sitting ducks.
We're waiting.
I don't know if the next acceleration will be the one that takes us to 100x speed. But once we hit that point, there are months left. We could get lucky. The next one could be a minor acceleration. We might not get the major acceleration for more than a decade. That's not a smart bet, putting all your eggs in that basket, though. This pep talk is to tell you, it's time to turn it up another gear with your information processing and with your preparation. For you, for your children, for your friends and family, and as I alluded before, for people you don't even know.
That's what scares me about this fucking election, too. I'm not saying that they would do this, but I definitely think they have in the past. Like, allowed things to happen just so that they can tighten up on restrictions and laws and scare people more and get people to vote one way or another.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians.
We don't do that now, though. We don't mess around in other people's elections, Jim.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on this former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interest of...
Scary shit.
We're looking at weird times, my friend.
The weirdest, right?
The fucking weirdest.
Alrighty, so if it's just me, tell me it's just me. But I have to ask. I don't even know if this fucking video is gonna get literally anywhere. And if it does, cool. If it doesn't, also cool. But does it just feel so fucking weird? Like everything feels so fucking weird. Like you go to work every day, you pay your bills, but it just doesn't feel right. Like the vibe, like literal vibe of the world, like just kind of feels off. Like, why are we going to work? Why are we paying our bills? Like, why are we paying taxes? Because it just seems so like fucking pointless at this point. Like where we are is like a fucking like humanity and like the US. It just, everything feels so fucking weird. Does it not, or is it just me? Because it just feels fucking weird. Me and my buddy were talking about it at work, and I want to know, does the world just feel really, really fucking weird right now? Like, why are we doing what we're doing?
Do you know what makes me special?
No, what?
I'm a queer. And I'm a witch!
Why are we doing this? What's the end goal of what we're doing right now?
And then one final video, simply called...
I'm not crazy, I just don't give a fuck!
If you have a creative mind, you're gonna doubt a lot of things about the world, about yourself, that's all completely normal.
What's the end goal of what we're doing right now?
I think we're reaching this point where some sudden thing is going to happen. I believe in that theory of the black swan.
Yes.
It's going to pop up, and it's not going to be controllable. But people, you ask, what can they do? I think the most important thing is understand what's going on. Is education.
Do you believe that there needs to be well-defined, well-articulated boundaries that are put in place by regulators, by governments, keeping their local context in mind?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, let's go back to 2014 when I was actually interviewing to open Twitter's ANZ in Southeast Asia, their trust and safety, as well as their public policy and philanthropy programs. A public figure tragically took her life after being terribly trolled on Twitter.
You bitch! Put her in house arrest, you pussy! You fucking loser! You and your dirty ass brother, fuck him too, dumb bitch!
And that resulted in a petition that was signed by hundreds of thousands of people that went to the government that said, enough is enough. We have to draw a line. When online discourse moves into the area or veers into the lane of online harm, government should take action. And so our ICT minister at the time eventually became our PM, but he was also a technology entrepreneur and a barrister. And he said, yep, freedom of expression is going to be an issue. And he said, yep, freedom of expression is going to be an issue. We've started something called the Global Online Safety Regulators Network so that we can work together. And while political decisions and cultural context and history will determine, what is considered safe or what is considered harm in any given country, if we can build a degree of regulatory coherence, nobody wants to see a splinter net of regulations, which will be very challenging for the companies to be able to comply with. But this is where the collaboration with the platforms happen, because we can say to Instagram or Snap, this meets our threshold, but it also violates your terms of service. Do you want to take it down voluntarily? In 90% of cases they do, and in most cases, young people just want the content taken down. And we know that the more quickly we do that, the more that reduces the mental distress. So we have a scheme for image-based abuse, which also covers sexual extortion and deepfakes.
Gentlemen, you will always remember this as the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow.
And we have remedial powers, so we can target both platforms and perpetrators, because we have to remember it's the bad actors that are weaponizing this technology against people.
Wearable devices. So these are brain sensors that are starting to be embedded in everyday devices, but until now have been a number of niche companies that really have focused on mindfulness and meditation. The use of, for example, brain sensors that can pick up electrical activity in the brain at a pretty low resolution, but advances in AI have both improved what the signal is that can come from the brain and enabled the miniaturization of those products. As a lot of the major tech companies start to invest in these brain sensors, it's a huge, I think, untapped market in many ways of integrating them into everyday devices. These are earbuds or watches or headphones and the soft cups around the ears. Many of those products are hitting the market this year, and others are hitting them within the next 2 years, such that people can listen to music, a phone call, etc., while having those devices in ears. Initially, what they will be capable of doing is very high-level brain state reading. Things like, are you tired? Are you paying attention? Is your mind wandering? Are you happy or sad?
None of the above. Check.
They maybe enable interaction like up, down, left, right for interaction with other technologies. And they're being embedded into things like virtual reality headsets.
The newest way to monitor attention is through a device like this one. These are ear pods that are launching later this year. Ear pods that can pick up brainwave activity and tell whether or not a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering. Well, you might think, fine, but even if we can tell whether a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering, you can't tell what they're paying attention to. You would be wrong. It turns out that you can not only tell whether a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering, but you can discriminate between the kinds of things that they're paying attention to. Whether they're doing something like central tasks, like programming, peripheral tasks, like writing documentation, or unrelated tasks, like surfing social media or online browsing. When you combine brainwave activity together with other forms of software and surveillance technology, the power becomes quite precise.
AI, Ted Kaczynski was likely right, will get away from us. We will be controlled by the thing that we made. All those are bad. Like, that's just bad. And we need to say unequivocally, it's bad. It's bad to be controlled by machines.
Right.
Machines are helpmates. Like, we created them to help us, to make our lives better, not to take orders from them. So I don't know why we're not having any of these conversations right now. We're just acting as if this is like some kind of virus, like COVID, that just spreads across the world inexorably. There's nothing we can do about it. Just wait to get it. It's like, no. If we agree that the outcome is bad, and specifically it's bad for people, we should care what's good for people. That's all we should care about. Is it good for people or not? If it's bad for people, then we should strangle it in its crib right now.
Right.
And why just blow up the data centers? Like, why is that hard? If it's actually going to become what you just described, which is a threat to people, humanity, life, then we have a moral obligation to murder it immediately. And since it's not alive, we don't need to feel bad about that.
Okay, let's roll it.
You're the last people in the world to tell anyone else on earth about logic, reason, and sense. Your Western, so-called Enlightenment civilization is a monstrosity in human history. Or you've committed genocide after genocide, and you're committing one right now in Gaza. Your logical, rational, reasonable European powers obliterated the Native Americans. You systematically dehumanized and enslaved Africans for centuries. You carried out population extermination in Namibia, in Congo, in Algeria, and on your own continent against the Jews, the Holocaust, the Gypsies, the Muslims in Bosnia, on and on. You can't talk about rationality and reason. You must be joking. You can only say that if you live inside of your own Western propaganda echo chamber. It's an absurd thing. It's just as absurd as calling yourselves democracies. You created societies that sacralize wealth, that sanctify the rich, giving them near holy authority. You didn't abandon the papal tyranny. You just shifted it into the morality-free private sector. It makes sense to you, in your enlightened logic and reason, that sick people in your societies, for example, can suffer and die if they're poor, and that every human interaction and every human endeavor should be monetized in order for it to have any value, and whatever can be monetized should therefore be socially acceptable and respectable, no matter how deranged and perverse it is.
I'm going to vote for Biden, even though he's old, which also translates into wise and wisdom, which we may need right now.
Scumbag piece of garbage.
That is the idea. I know very well our founding fathers were slave owners.
Yes,
and I know very well that they probably did not imagine that America would be today what it is.
They
However,
would have been appalled by the idea. Furthermore, what you're saying is somehow whites were about to choke to death on their own homogeneity when people like yourself kindly arrived with diversity and saved us from ourselves. No, we built a wonderful country that your ancestors could not have been. That is why people like you come here. And the more you come in larger numbers, you will change the country my ancestors built into something else. And it is completely normal for me to wish to oppose that.
Mr. Taylor, I've taken enough of your time. Do not fear me, Gypsy. All I want from you is your tears.
Not CNN. See, it's all sarcastic. But see, we've gone from there's no move for a world government, it doesn't exist, nuts talk about it, to you can't prove the world government that's being formed is murderous.
I'm not even granting you that there's a world government being formed.
Yeah, and that's why you're discredited.
In the last 15 years, the planet has not got less green, it's got more green. Stunningly more green, 15% essentially in 15 years. That's an area that's larger than the continental United States. And here's the reason. The less carbon dioxide in the air, the more the plants have to open their pores, and that means the more susceptible they are to drying out. Now, what's happened as a consequence of increased carbon dioxide production is that plants can breathe easier, and so they don't have to open their pores to the same degree. The very desert areas that the climate apocalypse were claiming would expand and spread, the exact opposite has happened.
How dare you?
We can't wait for the kind of drought Australia had to change our political culture.
About 2/3, I would guess, of the world is desertifying.
What's the solution? Here it is. Put a price on carbon. We need a CO2 tax, revenue neutral.
The best way to oppose fake news is for people to watch outlets like MSNBC, where you report real news all the time.
Underground.
Let's be clear about the event called birthday. Let's be really clear about that event. People have been worried about the mark of the beast forever. And they worry about it today. They're worried that there's going to be something implanted into their arm, into their wrist, into their hand, implanted into them that is going to then evidence the mark of the beast.
True.
That implant has already occurred.
Yeah.
It's the greatest implant of all time. And it's an implant as an idea in your mind.
And it's even more effective because it's not of substance, so you can't point to it and say, this is it, see, you did it.
And in fact, everybody's happy that they have the mark of the beast.
Yes.
They celebrate it every year.
Yes. Happy.
They agreed to it every year, and that idea that implant in your mind, in your brain, is the birthday.
Yep, and in fact you are weird and unkind if you don't wish them a happy one every year.
So they have everyone agreeing to the mark of the beast by celebrating the event that gives rise to the mark.
Yes.
Which is the cut. So the cut creates this possibility. The cut allows for the Gregorian calendar character to be applied, and that idea, the birthday, is the implant.
Yeah.
And it's implanted into your mind.
Yep.
How do you get people to stop claiming the mark of the beast when they want to celebrate it every year?
And it's associated in your mind with all these wonderful things every year. You get to be special, you get presents, you get attention.
What is something that usually goes along with the celebration? What do people usually
You mean the cake?
Have
and the
a
candles?
cake.
The cake and the candles.
So the cake, what's the Greek word for cake?
Placenta.
Placenta. So all you have to do is understand that the biology, the birthday cake is the placenta. And by allowing this tradition to continue, you will always be subject to the mark of the beast. The Gregorian calendar character, which is a narrative that is under the authority, the authorship of Pope Gregory as of 1582. So if you want to keep wearing the clothing of a character born to a timeline claimed or created by the Pope, then keep celebrating the birthday.
And keep agreeing that an outside authority has authority over you.
The birth certificated person, by the way, is called a conventional child. It's a child of convention. And that's what we're going to get back to clausula now, because we're talking about such conventions.
So what about the media? What about the newspapers and the television people who've got you in this bag?
They're bloodsuckers. That's what I think about them. I mean, I know that that's their gig, and they have to do that. But still in all, it kind of offends me as a human being that someone would talk to you when they aren't really interested in you.
Would you kick a pony in the face to end world hunger?
I don't like to abuse animals.
So you're gonna let millions of people starve for just one stupid pony? High five.
Getting that shot?
Yeah, get into it.
Getting that shot really was this motherfucker an amazing feeling. It hits you. An amazing feeling. It hits you. It hits you.
Okay, maybe if you did some more of it, those wrinkles, they'd go away.
It hits you. It hits you. It hits you. Ta-da!
Don't you see? This was all a part of the plan.
The blueprint, the game plan was made in the 80s. Create a pandemic, with a virus that's going wild, right? Fauci was given like over $350 million to research this, to come up with drugs, new or repurposed, to handle the AIDS pandemic. And all they came up with was AZT. And if you do even a smidge of research, and I know I'm not a, epidemiologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an immunologist, whatever the fuck, I can read though, right? And I can learn and look things up just like any normal person. I can do my own research, which was so vilified, to even question authority. But that was the game plan back then. Create an environment where only one thing works. Back then, AZT. Now, remdesivir until we get a vaccine. Which, by the way, Anthony Fauci had stake in the Moderna vaccine. And we know Pfizer is one of the most criminally corrupt organizations ever. The fine they paid was the biggest in the history of the DOJ in 2009. Like, what are we talking about? We're going to put our full trust in science that can't be questioned.
When do they start giving them hepatitis B? That's
12 hours
That's
in.
when birth. Yeah.
12 hours in, they came into the room and they're like, hepatitis B.
Yo!
And I was like, what is it? Because I didn't know what it was. And they're like, it's a disease that could kill your kid. And I was like, well, we should probably give it to her. And then I'm like, how do you even get it? And they're like, it's a sexually transmitted disease. And I was like, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we could pump the brakes a little bit.
12
on this
hours
one.
old?
Yeah.
We got time.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Okay, so I understand. So now there's a skepticism. People see.
But then, right now, just having this conversation, even talking about it the way we've talked about it so carefully, you'll be labeled an anti-vaxxer. So Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan float around anti-vax conspiracy theories.
Well, we're not conspirizing right now, right?
Nope.
We're just literally saying maybe it's okay to do the research without shame.
Well, how is it not possible to talk about it without being labeled a kook? If this is a thing, if you're injecting kids with chemicals, and we know that medications have adverse effects, even simple medications. Some people have horrible effects from all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. My wife, in order for her to go to school, had to get the booster. Like, she was getting her MBA, and she had to.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing with kids. Like, if you want to put your kid in, like, a school, they have to have them all.
Yeah.
If you want to put it in a daycare,
if you want to travel, if you want to fly, certain jobs.
So you start to feel the pressure, and the outside pressure makes you go, okay, I'm being forced into this decision. I don't really have my freedom. You say I have my freedom, but I want my kid to get educated.
Right.
I want my kid to be able to go see their grandparents. I want my kid to do these things. And yeah, you do feel this, you feel a social pressure. You don't want to be labeled a fucking anti-vax weirdo, but at the same time,
several of us, myself included, felt that we were going to deal with a problem that was going to mushroom and have major implications just on what we knew about the level and the prevalence of sexually transmitted diseases in the male homosexual population, the level of hepatitis B in the IV drug abusers, that once you introduce an infection into a population that has very active sexual interactions, you are going to see a rampant spread. We knew it. It was only a very, very small amount there at the time, but it happened. You saw that extraordinary mushrooming.
Because of the anti-science, anti-vax approach that we see related to COVID, the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. approach about vaccine, that it's spilling over now into vaccines of any type. Our politicians who attack our scientists call us either misleading or flip-floppers. So there really is a big anti-science feeling among several of elected officials in the United States.
One of the problems with journalism, and I guess it's an unavoidable problem, is that you try to have a balanced story. And when you try to have a balanced story, you want to get multiple opinions in a balanced story. And what's the right word? What trap you get into when you do that is that you can often lead to the audience getting a feeling of false equivalency. So you could say, well, Tony Fauci says that you should get vaccinated, the vaccines are safe, and they're highly effective. And I have an MD, and I'm in the National Academy of Sciences and all that. Then you look for someone who has equivalent qualifications, and they says, no, vaccines don't work, and they kill you rather than help you. And in your quest to be fair, you leave it up to the reader to figure out who is right and who is wrong. And I think that's a trap of journalism that you really got to get away from, because you create a false equivalency.
At the center of this global business network is Klaus Schwab, the forum's executive chairman.
The World Economic Forum is, if I may say so, it's a connecting organization.
Connecting?
It's a connecting organization. They are governmental organizations or they are private organizations. We need an approach where we integrate all actors, because the big challenges in the world cannot be solved by governments alone or by business alone. We need to connect the key governmental and non-governmental actors.
Schwab says finding a global solution to the crisis requires international networking that goes beyond purely national interests. The World Economic Forum employs a staff from 55 countries who are in constant touch with global leaders.
So we have a World Health Organization for health issues, we have a World Trade Organization for trade issues, we have an IMF for financial issues, because such a connecting organization is absolutely necessary in the 21st century. The other challenges which we have, let's take climate change. Then we may solve the present crisis, but the next crisis is just in front of us, and we stumble from one crisis to another crisis.
Schwab says a new philosophy is needed for the post-crisis era. Last year, he wrote a piece in the U.S. magazine Foreign Affairs. He coined the phrase global corporate citizenship, urging businesses to be good members of the global community.
Is that a scheme that the Forum is trying to create for new possible governance of international issues?
I think what makes CRISPR so interesting, both as a biological phenomenon and as a technology, is that it's a seek and destroy sort of mechanism in biology that could be harnessed for a different purpose as a technology. And to describe that, I guess I would start by saying that it's a programmable system. So it's a way that bacteria can learn about the genetic material of viruses that infect them. And not only that, to store a genetic vaccination card in their DNA that allows them to essentially remember what viruses have infected them in the past, and not only remember them, but also find them and cut them up if they should show up again.
Even though I know we will have another pandemic, it's not going to be one that has multiple successive variants.
The evidence now, we don't know what the origin is, but there's so much effort that's put into conspiracy theories about what the origin is that we don't know for sure. But the prevailing evidence from scientists throughout the world, including here in the UK, indicates strongly that it likely, though without definitive proof, came from a natural spillover in the Wuhan market. Interestingly, each of these variants increasingly evaded the immune response, something you almost never see in infectious disease. Prior infection does not prevent you from getting infected again. The immunity that you build up likely will protect you from getting severe disease, but it won't protect you. I've been infected twice and vaccinated 6 times. So that's what we're talking about, so-called herd immunity.
I've been infected twice and vaccinated 6 times. So that's what we're talking about, so-called herd immunity. It just somehow does not exist. So what are we going to do? This is a cartoon
that shows what we can't do. We can't play whack-a-mole. We can't be making a new vaccine for every single new variant. Otherwise, we would have had about 25 different vaccines right now. However, there is a concern that somehow lurking, we may get a new variant.
And then we got nothing more to talk about.
Digital approach, you can track where they're pregnant women, are they coming in for their visits? Are they getting their vaccines? You can make sure that, all the workers are being hired, that they're properly trained. During the pandemic, those digital systems were very impressive. India has adopted a lot of new vaccines for things like pneumonia and diarrhea. Those have made a huge difference. Of course, they're also made by our partners in India. at very attractive cost and therefore beneficial not just to India. There's still work to be done on things like nutrition and anemia, and the government has set very ambitious goals.
Are you up on like conspiracy stuff? You know who Klaus Schwab is? We have a Darth Vader affecting the world. His name is Klaus Schwab. He was Henry Kissinger's creation. And he's the head of the World Economic Forum, WEF. Okay. He's the head. He literally is Darth Vader. You guys gotta get on it, dude. I'm telling you, this guy is a real life Darth. It's gonna affect all your lives. You gotta pay attention to this guy, dog.
Even if my son is working in a very important position in the forum, but at any time he could go his own way if he wanted to do so.
Have you ever thought about succession?
Yes, of course. Yes. It's important because I want this idea. It's not only a foundation. I want to have this idea continuing, and certainly I plan for quite some time still to be at the use of this organization. People tell me as long as I'm coming to the office on Monday morning with more ideas than they can digest, I still have my place here.
The next day.
I have myself been affected by cancer.
6 hours later.
I have survived it.
Look at me in my motherfucking eyes.
I have survived it. And I owe my survival because it was detected at an early stage.
Thanks. I love you, man. Bye. Savage! I'm a savage! Oh! I'm a savage! Whatever I want, I'm going to get! Whatever I want, I have to get!
The system needs a reset. And I have published this book, and I just looked, will be very much devoted to this great reset. And actually, the next annual meeting of the World Economic Forum will consist of two parts. One at the usual time in end of January. January, we will define all the problems which the world has. It's a good moment at the beginning of the year with after the US elections and so on. Where do we stand? What is the state of the world? And then we will have a physical meeting, assuming that vaccines are coming fast enough. We will have a physical meeting in May where we will, in my opinion, it will be the most important meeting we ever had, because what we will do is to look at all the system improvements which we have to undertake. So shaping a new social contract.
There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world, but we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
By dropping the bomb ourselves.
Everything all right, Mr. Howard?
Fine. I'm fine, Betty.
War never changes.
War never changes. You look out at this wasteland, looks like chaos. But there's always somebody behind the wheel. And that's who I want to talk to.
It is estimated by pretty good modeling that in the United States, that approximately 200,000 people unnecessarily died of COVID because they refused to get vaccinated. And they refused to get vaccinated because there were ideological and political trends that were telling them they shouldn't get vaccinated. Do you know that more Republicans in the United States have died of COVID than Democrats, because many of the Republicans
are anti-vaxxer, which is crazy that political ideology determines whether you're going to live or die. That's crazy.
The best way to oppose fake news is for people to watch outlets like MSNBC, where you report real news all the time.
I'm having security because I'm telling people they should get vaccinated. I'm telling them they should wear a mask. I'm telling them they should take care of themselves and protect themselves and their family from COVID. And there are elements in society who feel that that's an encroachment on their individual liberties. So instead of, disagreeing, they threaten with physical threats, with harassments, online, telephone, mail, but actually some true physical threats of violence against me. So it's really unfortunate that as a public health official, you have to have security.
Do you still get threats? Like 4 years later?
Do I still get threats? Of course. They know the address, telephone number of my daughters. They know my wife's telephone number. They certainly know mine. They know where I live. And they threaten. And then sometimes the threats become real. I mean, there have been at least 2 people that have been arrested who actually were trying to kill me. One was arrested with an AR-15 rifle in their car.
Oh, fuck yeah, huh? Love that shit.
Coming towards my house. He was arrested in another state accidentally. He got stopped at a stop sign, a traffic sign.
What the fuck is this? I simply don't know, and I'm just here doing things.
The man pisses excellence. He's doing the best he can under tough circumstances.
I have transformed myself into something dark.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
Everyone in the Order knew Anakin Skywalker. Few would live to see what he became.
As a Jewish person, I don't feel safe right now. Dude, this is top tier fucking content. I love that. This definitely isn't the end of all days.
They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of snakes is under their lips. And their mouths are full of bitterness and curses. And in their paths, nothing but ruin and misery. And the fear of God is not before their eyes. They have taken the hearts and minds of our leaders. They have recruited the rich and the powerful. And they have blinded us to the truth. Our human spirit is corrupted. Why do we worship greed? Because outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners, they have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
Think Jesus Christ would roll around in a Rolls Royce?
I think he would have.
He made that airplane so cheap for me, I couldn't help but buy it.
Any religious leader who speaks the word of God, who has more than one suit, while someone has no clothes, is a cop-out.
You know, Larry, I just don't see it that way.
Some fellow said, okay, I was worth $150 million. I said, that's an insult. $150 million, that's an insult. $150 million, too small.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
Glory to God, you're not bound to this chair. The day will come, you'll walk out of it. In the name of Jesus.
We can do it again tomorrow if you like, Mr. Carroll.
So what is tick weaponization? So in the interviews with Willie, what he said was, I spent over a decade in the biological weapons program, a contractor to Fort Detrick, working on weaponizing fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes, trying to mass produce them, stuffing fleas with the plague, stuffing mosquitoes with deadly Trinidad virus, and then stuffing ticks with either deadly or incapacitating diseases like relapsing fever, Venezuelan equine encephalitis, rabies, leptospirosis, which is another spirochete. So it's just like Dr. Strangelove trying to make new diseases, mixing bacteria and virus in ticks with the intent of, this is the perfect stealth weapon. It's poor man's nuke. You drop these insects on an enemy, it weakens the population, it ties up the medical resources, but doesn't destroy infrastructure like a nuclear bomb would. And from a bean counter in the military, they said, we can kill 10,000 people at $1.33 a life. So anyways, it was just, there was more to tick-borne diseases than we realized, and I began suspecting that Willie was right, given this context.
It's hard to digest all of this. It's just so evil. It's hard to believe it could happen in the United States. But I think you're right that it did, and maybe still happening.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
I've always loved God. I grew up a whole different religion. Somehow through this Hollywood thing that I've been a part of I've been a SAG member since 1997, and I'm 45 years old. I'm an old lady, so that's a long time. Somehow I navigated through it without going down the wrong path. And not saying I hadn't gone down the wrong path here and there, but I'd never done something, because I said, ain't nothing come to me that easy. You just drink some of this stuff and I go to the top. It just didn't add up to me, because everything in my life's been a struggle, right? I came from a trailer park, Section 8 housing. Don't tell me I'm going to drink a gold juice and I'm going to have pure success till the day I die. It doesn't happen like that. And I asked too many questions, I think. They'd be like, oh, she asked way too many questions. Yeah, but I don't know. Listen, I don't know what they were trying to do. I was the first time very young, the second time still pretty young, and the third time was just one last try. It was during Orange is the New Black, and it was really scary. That one was really scary. But I just was like,
what was scary?
I don't know.
Like the situation that you were in?
Just the way it was presented was scary. It scared me. Because it was a call that came in, kept coming in and coming in.
A phone call?
Yeah.
Legitimately, someone calls you on the phone and says,
this time,
do you want the gold juice?
It wasn't
yes
like
or no. And he's, no! Okay.
No.
Not good.
The third time, the last time, I was like, because I was actually in my bed reading the Bible. It was strewn across my lap. And I finally answered this call that kept coming in. And I was reading the Bible, like just a normal day, going through some scripture. And I finally answered, like, hello. And it was this person that claimed their name was Truman. And they said, after a couple sentences, they said, that thing that you're reading on your lap? That's a bunch of BS. And I looked around my house, and I didn't want to panic, because I didn't want them to think that I was scared, that they knew exactly what I was reading on my lap. But at that moment, that was so scary to me. I thought yeah, dude. And this is all the truth. This is the truth. I even had a friend here that was in the living room, it was like, hang up. And I'm like, no, because I wanted to know, like, what am I dealing with? And on it went, and they started telling me about the Anunnaki and the Sumerians and Enki and all the like Book of Enoch and how everything on my lap was BS. And I'm like, finally, what's on my lap?
They're doing very strange experimentation. There are beings from portals coming in and out. It's physicists from the CERN who told me this.
They've testified to beings coming in and out of portals.
Yes, they have. Apparently, in the bottom of the CERN, this portal, this door, where they are dealing with all the subatomic dimensions. They say there are 17 different dimensions of reality. That's what those physicists say. Some others say there are more dimensions. You know, they had a being, they did not tell me more, who came that doesn't resemble a human. And then they had another one, and they have a proof because they left a scarf. They left a scarf. And now, when you look at what is going on in the CERN, there is a fight from some of the military agencies, Intel. They say that there is a fight on time. They're trying to change time. I'm just saying that because as
The hypnotizing world of picture television brings us the news of the world through two central news agencies called Reuters and the Associated Press. The Rothschilds bought Reuters in the 1800s, which later bought the Associated Press and made the Rothschild family owners of the world's largest central news services. To the present day, the world depends on these Rothschild-owned central news services as their main source of news and information. In his book called Who Owns the TV Networks, author Eustace Mullins claims that the major TV networks, radio stations, newspapers, and publishing empires are controlled by the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan money cartels through their corporate conglomerates. The bankster-owned media conglomerates include weapons manufacturers General Electric and Westinghouse, which profit from promoting wars. Control over the internet, publishing, recording, and top cable companies can be traced back to the same Big Five media empires: General Electric, Time Warner, Viacom, Disney, and News Corp. These media monopolies are owned directly or indirectly by the Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Oppenheimer Brotherhood. Yes, there are now more stations and more media voices, but they're all coming from the same ventriloquist. Every TV show needs corporate sponsors, and corporate sponsors sponsor pro-business, pro-government programming, and journalists who support the agenda of the Big Five media owners. While 2/3 of the world goes hungry, these banksters offer gazillion-dollar sponsorships to sports athletes to play with their balls. Why? Because they keep the masses distracted from the important issues.
And welcome back to the show. I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. Well, I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
Got it. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, we all know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
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 Mike Myers says, yeah, baby. Mike Myers says, yeah, baby. Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby. Mike Myers.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
Prince Charles is the main heir of Count Dracula? I agree. That sounds insane. I bet you $1 million.
Bring that up, Jamie.
Type in Prince Charles, Count Dracula.
Okay.
Prince Charles is the heir of Count Dracula.
Is that right?
He moved in 5 years ago to Count Dracula's castle, and he lives with a group of homeless children in it.
No, he does not.
I swear to God.
Prince Charles. Prince Harry's dad.
Prince Charles, the heir of the throne of the dragon.
Okay.
is a Transylvanian
According
prince.
to this Google search from express.co.uk, Prince Charles has distant kinship to Vlad Tepes, the 15th century Wakalyan ruler, whom the Irish novelist based his Dracula.
Hold on. Prince Charles, like the one that we all know. Prince Charles.
Yeah, he's related to Count Dracula. Or Dracula.
Same.
But it's way worse than that.
And now
he lives in Dracula Castle with children.
According to express.co.
I swear to God.
He lives with,
You will
that's
beat my-
also on
I tell you,
express.com.
According to this British tabloid. I
Get
don't know.
5 punches right in the nose. Why? He lives, it says, with the orphans in the castle.
Prince Charles?
Pull up Prince Charles, Dracula Castle.
That's how you do a Google search. My
Yeah.
guy. You just cut your shit in
This
half.
guy's good at Googling.
Prince Charles, Dracula Castle. Look it up, Jamie.
Okay.
Everyone's going to do this. You're going to find out my line. And I remember like 10 years ago, finally, he's like, I live in the castle. Little boys, he's like, I live in the castle with them. It's like Dracula Castle on a mountain, like you saw in the movies.
Is that why they say Andrew's the pedophile to distract from Charles?
Prince Andrew. Don't point at me and say,
what are you doing?
Yeah,
You are crazy, dude.
Yo, you right. My bad. I ain't
So wait a minute. Now you really got me onto some shit. The worse things that you do, the more interconnected you are with these interdimensional beings.
You have to commit these crimes against humanity to prove your cred with them. Yeah.
Why do you have to prove your cred in that way?
Because they're damn demons.
So how did
all
you
the
find
higher
out?
order stuff doesn't involve itself. Like you think of God, like God's way up there, but there's all this other stuff.
Pay attention, America. What's going on here? Immigrants that are plucked out of the cartel pipeline in Central America at a DHS-established regional processing center, or any of those illegal aliens being flown directly from foreign nations into the interior of our country. Can we get a straight answer there?
We're screening individuals who are maybe eligible for existing pathways, such as refugee resettlement, and we are conducting full refugee resettlement screening and vetting.
Are they being flown into the interior of our country?
If they are indeed approved to be resettled as refugees, then the standard processes apply. They are being organized.
This was how you try to get to a yes, America. The answer is yes. Illegal aliens are being pulled from the cartel pipeline at DHS-established regional processing centers in Central and South America and flown directly into the interior of our country.
It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy, you know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells. The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have any advance knowledge of what was going to happen that day? They said they worked for a company called Urban Moving. The FBI obtained a search warrant for the company's offices.
2 SUVs were filled up with between 9 and 12 boxes and computers.
Not long after the arrests, the offices of Urban Moving were simply abandoned. Almost everything was left behind. In jail, the 5 Israelis were repeatedly interrogated and given lie detector tests. Stephen Gordon was their American lawyer.
They were asked questions if they had ever been approached by or hired by any non-United States intelligence community.
While there is still some debate among American intelligence officials, many investigators believe some of the men were part of an Israeli operation aimed at monitoring radical Islamic charities that support groups like Hamas, something lawyers for the 5 men and the Israeli government strongly deny.
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event. Our purpose was to document the event.
Doing it again. And they're really doing it again in terms of CNN's out there again, faking their war footage.
Yeah, we're getting video through now, Jerry. Now you can see the area is completely deserted, but I want you to get them off the road, get them laid down next to the road, okay? Closer to the road, Jerry. Move them. It looks like we're in the middle of a forest.
Down, close, close, close.
Okay, Jerry, tell the cameraman to keep Clarissa in shot, okay? It's not the Blair Witch Project.
You're fine, you're fine. You're fine.
That's it, perfect. To get nice and close. Get the cameraman nice and close.
Clarissa is on the ground right now. Clarissa, tell us what's happening.
Stand by.
Hi, John. So forgive me, I have a slightly unelegant position, but we have just had a massive barrage of rockets coming in here. Being crouched in a ditch to know exactly what's been going on.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're in the middle of a war zone. People behind them are just walking by. All lies all the time. That's what they do. But people still fall for it.
Inside this building are the headquarters of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. They would not let us photograph inside their headquarters. AIPAC says it is the spearhead for support for Israel here in Washington. It is not a political action committee. It does not make campaign contributions. But the clout of AIPAC here on Capitol Hill is legendary.
Practically every congressman and senator says his prayers to the AIPAC lobby. No, they've done an enormous job of corrupting the American democratic process.
George Ball was #2 in the State Department under Presidents Kennedy and Johnson, and he has never been reluctant to criticize the pro-Israel lobby.
It's the most effective lobby in the United States today, and I would put that ahead of the National Rifle Association.
What's wrong with picking a candidate to support on the basis of the way that he has voted? Isn't that the American way?
I think it's a caricature of the American way.
The word power, when it's used for AIPAC, is a myth. It's baloney. AIPAC is powerful only because the American people are behind Israel.
Rabbi Israel Miller is the vice president of AIPAC. AIPAC is not anti-Chafee.
No, AIPAC has put on the public record his votes on some of the issues that concern us, but we deal with a very politically aware and sophisticated group of people, the pro-Israel community, and they make up their own minds. You know, if we were
You
to
don't
tell
direct
them, we do not direct them.
Let me read to you a memo, an AIPAC memo, November 3rd, 1987. Senate race. Lieutenant Governor Richard Leach, Democrat, Rhode Island, is running against incumbent Senator John Chafee, Republican. Leach, who is Jewish, has a very good chance. Our problem is that the pro-Israel community is not excited and as forthcoming as they should be. We need to put the word out on this race, emphasizing Chafee's poor record. The focus should be to generate interest for a terrific candidate to replace a poor supporter of our issue. See attached voting record and Marty's analysis. It's an AIPAC memo.
Who signed it? I don't recognize it as an AIPAC memo.
Rabbi Miller continued.
In this case, I think all that was being said was that Leach has a chance against an incumbent senator.
Who has a poor record. And we got to get the word out.
His record is not as poor as some other senators.
Shortly after that interview, AIPAC confirmed that the memo was in fact written by a former AIPAC political staffer. But they insisted she was a low-level employee and that her memo did not reflect AIPAC policy. And that's important for AIPAC because under U.S. federal election regulations, if it were shown that pro-Israel PACs were working in conjunction with AIPAC or were coordinated by AIPAC, that would arguably be a violation of the law. Well, shortly before this broadcast, 60 Minutes received in the mail from an anonymous sender another memo written by a high-level AIPAC official, Liz Schreier, in which she urged a colleague to make certain that several pro-Israel PACs around the country funnel cash contributions to a handful of senatorial candidates. AIPAC officials acknowledged to us the memo was indeed an AIPAC document, but they declined to answer any questions about it. They said in a statement that despite appearances to the contrary, AIPAC does not and does not have the power to direct fundraising decisions. Now, who are other senatorial candidates in current races with what pro-Israel PACs call poor records on Israel? Well, for instance, this year, many pro-Israel PACs are trying to defeat incumbent Senator Chick Hecht of Nevada, even though he is Jewish, because he too did not follow the AIPAC line on weapon sales to the Arabs. And there are many who charge that AIPAC, with its sights set only on Israel, is just too demanding of U.S. politicians.
We aren't demanding of U.S. politicians. We have a concern about Israel, which is understandable, particularly in this generation. Had you and I been in certain parts of Europe, we would have walked to Auschwitz together. We're very sensitive about the security, about the future of Israel, and support of Israel means that we feel that it is in the interest not merely of Israel, but also in the interest of the United States. Israel is a strategic ally of the United States.
In recent years, AIPAC and the pro-Israel PACs have helped defeat, among others, Congressman Paul Findlay and Pete McCloskey, Senators Harrison Schmitt of New Mexico, Walter Huddleston of Kentucky, and Chuck Percy of Illinois. Like Senator Chafee, Percy too came out in favor of that sale of AWACS to the Saudis.
I finally reached the stage where, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, I saw our foreign policy totally turned around. With a Muslim world, 800 million people looking askance at the United States of America, what is happening? Who is running the foreign policy? Can Israel and the Prime Minister have more power than the entire Senate of the United States or the President of the United States? And that, to me, I simply said, enough is enough.
That particular AWACS sale to Saudi Arabia did manage to pass the Congress, and in 1984, pro-Israel PACs and other individuals spent millions to unseat the powerful Senator Percy.
Let me just quote to you the words of the executive director of AIPAC, Tom Dyer. After the defeat of Chuck Percy a few years back, he said to a Jewish group in Toronto, quote, "All the Jews in America from coast to coast gathered to oust Percy. And the American politicians, those who hold public positions now, and those who aspired, got the message."
It was an unfelicitous expression of that which Tom felt in his enthusiasm and in his zeal. I think if he had it to say all over again, he would have put it altogether differently.
Rabbi Miller, about a year ago, the New York Times wrote, "AIPAC has become a major force in shaping U.S. policy in the Middle East. The organization has gained the power to influence a presidential candidate's choice of staff, to block practically any arms sale to an Arab country, and to serve as a catalyst for intimate military relations between the Pentagon and the Israel army." How did AIPAC become so powerful?
Again, I'll say that that's very flattering, but it's a myth. It's just not so. The American people support Israel, and therefore Congress votes as it does.
One of Israel's staunchest supporters is Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii, who says that AIPAC has nothing to do with his feelings about Israel.
If I can help Israel help herself in every instance, I'd do so. I'm also convinced it's in our national interest. I've yet to see any country in that part of the world that is as reliable as far as our strategic requirements are concerned as Israel is.
I don't believe it's an ally at all. We have no alliance with it. I mean, they insist on total freedom of action, and they insist on our subsidizing their total freedom of action.
The amount of that subsidy is remarkable and a testament to AIPAC's clout on Capitol Hill. Altogether, Israel gets more than $3 billion a year in assistance from the United States.
Sometimes the votes go through without a single debate involving billions of dollars. You couldn't spend that kind of money in this country without a huge debate going on. But a foreign government gets this money without debate because simply it's just organized to get it.
Why does Israel get more aid, more U.S. aid, than any other country in the world? $700 per Israeli per year, as opposed to $50 per Egyptian per year, as opposed to $2 per African per year.
None of this money goes for the $700, goes to raise the living standard of Israeli people. This is for their defense. This is for the security of Israel. If Israel were destabilized, the Arabs, with all of their petrodollars and with all of their weapons, would just sweep Israel into the sea.
Is there a possibility of a backlash if Israel is perceived as too powerful in the halls of government here in Washington?
There's always this possibility if people begin to believe that little Israel is calling the shots. Then I'm certain Americans would resent that. They won't want any country, big or small, to be calling the shots in the Congress of the United States. But I don't think that AIPAC is calling the shots as far as I'm concerned.
Is it common sense or cowardice on the part of senators who just don't want to talk about this?
Oh, I would say the senators would say it's just being practical.
This past week, 3 major Jewish organizations took issue with AIPAC. The leaders of the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, and the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith asserted in a letter to the president of AIPAC that AIPAC does not speak for the consensus of the organized Jewish community. And in a CBS News poll of 1,530 American adults 2 weeks ago, we asked, do you think that in order to preserve the security of Israel, the U.S. should give Israel more aid than it gives any other country? 13% said yes, 72% said no, 15% said they don't know.
Eventually, our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Great Desert, which is Saudi Arabia, and then from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates. And who's on the other side of the Euphrates? The Kurds. And the Kurds are our friends. So we have the Mediterranean behind us, the Kurds in front of us, Lebanon, which really needs the umbrella of protection of Israel. And then we're going to take, I believe we're going to take Mecca, Medina, and Mount Sinai and purify those places. Purify those places.
Syncretism shows how everything, all the theologies, the philosophies, the religion, the sciences, they are all one. And the people from the Renaissance were doing this. Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, Giordano Bruno, all these guys. You see, what you find when you look at the ancient texts, you find that the theme is exactly the same. And especially to the ones who have insight, the exoteric knowers, rather than the exoteric believers. You see, they've been kept in the dark, in the lurch, but the secret of secrets is the grand arcanum which is hiding in these texts. It's the magnum opus that the philosopher has been looking for, the elixir of life, etc. It all has to do with the microcosm. Of course, what else could it be? In the Bible is the story of the microcosm of the man and how man was created. It's a literary masterpiece, but in the Bible there is only one story, and that is the story of the creation of man, and how man is the temple of what they call God, or the temple of Solomon. Solomon's temple was not built with hammer or saw, or the sound of hammer or saw. The temple is the body, you see, and this is how it works. This is how the temple is built. It's built on the principle of 12, because the universe is built on 12. Everything the universe does, it does through the number 12. 12 is the completeness of its cycles, you see. The human body must correspond to the universe because man is the measure of the universe. The ancients knew that there was a circle in the sky, and that circle was traversed by the 7 wanderers, the sun and the moon, the 2 luminaries, and the 5 visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And these 7 regulated that path in the sky that they blazed called the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the extension of the equator of the Earth. And they got that line of 360 degrees and they segmented it into 30 degrees because they knew that that's how the universe gets things done. It does things in 12s. And we have to understand numerology and the power of the numbers. What does 1 mean? What does 2 mean? What does 3 mean? But what they did, the ancients, is they knew that this Temple of Solomon
are on a path to World War III right now. Nothing is explained. Nothing is told us, and we have no choices. We're not offered any choices. The CIA comes in, does the briefings, and off we go to military escalation. And the public is profoundly unhappy, and the students are getting beaten up. Faculty are getting arrested because you're not supposed to speak about this. And then this concoction that this is about anti-Semitism. Give me a break. I'm a Jewish professor at Columbia University. This is not about anti-Semitism. This is about a slaughter that is taking place in Gaza right now, and the American people don't like it. They don't like our complicity in it, and they are protesting it. That's what this is about. But we don't behave in any reasonable way right now, even to discuss these things honestly, to know the facts, to have hearings where our executive is called to account by Congress. This was one of the fundamental roles that Congress was supposed to play. It's laughable to think that this is how anything works right now. It doesn't. I know it doesn't. There is no accountability whatsoever. There are closed-door briefings, and then if you approach a congressman or senator, as I often do, they say, well, Jeff, I'm just not supposed to talk about such matters. I'm sure you understand. In the meantime, we have our NATO allies talking about moving troops to Ukraine and Russia entering tactical nuclear drills right now. This is crazy. This is what you read about on the path to World War I, when a few people decided the fate of the world. And we had made a claim that because we are a republic, it couldn't happen here. But starting in 1947, it has been happening here repeatedly. That's the year of the National Security Act. That's the year when we went secret. And now we cannot hold our government accountable because everything is confidential.
What I intend to tell you tonight is something that you have never been able to learn from any other source. And what I tell you now concerns not only you, but your children and the survival of this country and Christianity. I'm not here just to dish up a few facts to send up your blood pressure, but I'm here to tell you things that will help you preserve what you consider the most sacred thing in the world, the liberty and the freedom and the right to live as Christians, where you have a little dignity and a little right to pursue the things that your conscience tells you are the right thing as Christians. Now, first of all, I'd like to tell you that on August 25th, 1960, that was shortly before election, Senator Kennedy, who is now the President of the United States, went to New York and delivered an address to the Zionist Organization of America. In that address, to reduce it to its briefest form, he stated that he would use the armed forces of the United States to preserve the existence of the regime set up in Palestine by the Zionists, who are now in occupation of that area. In other words, Christian boys are going to be yanked out of their homes, away from their families, and sent abroad to fight in Palestine against the Christian and Muslim Arabs who merely want to return to their homes. And these Christian boys are going to be asked to shoot to kill these innocent people who only want to follow out 15 resolutions passed by United Nations in the last 12 years, calling upon the Zionists to allow these people to return to their homes. Now, when the United States troops appear in the Middle East to fight with the Zionists as their allies to prevent the return of these people who were evicted from their homes in the 1948 armed insurrection by the Zionists who were transplanted there from Eastern Europe. When that happens, the United States will trigger World War III.
Don't be afraid.
You know, I had predicted there was a risk of a pandemic, and sadly, you know, that came true. We're past that. Now we need to get people working together in partnership and taking innovation and applying it to help the very poorest in the world.
And so much has changed in the past 2 decades, perhaps even the past few years in terms of media. Is the media, now we've got social media, of course, in the mix, is it your friend or enemy now?
Well, certainly I work with the media to get the good news out about how we've reduced deaths and where there's challenges. And, you know, I want citizens of generous countries to feel proud of the work they're doing. You know, Saudis should feel proud now they're on the polio eradication team. We need more of that generosity, and so the media is the way that we help people learn about it.
And of course, it's, you know, you must get really frustrated with all the conspiracy theories. They just never seem to go. Do you think you'll ever get over those? They say, you know, about vaccinations and chips and so on.
Well, up until the pandemic, I hadn't thought of that as a big phenomenon. I was completely taken by surprise at those conspiracies, you know, and some of them centered on me, and some of them were, you know, exactly the opposite of the truth. You know, vaccines have saved more lives than any other tool, and yet they came under attack.
We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Could you tell me what happened to Grandma? Whereabouts, roundabouts, Grandma turned around and she found out.
Now, all we know, Fauci's the worst, but he's worse than that. I think he's far worse than that. I think he's deceptive.
Yeah.
I mean, if the real Anthony Fauci, the book by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is not, if it's not accurate, he would be sued. He would be sued.
Right.
And just forget about what happened during COVID, just what we know took place during the AIDS crisis. Everyone should read that book. Everyone should understand this same game plan was played out during the AIDS crisis. And it's a game plan where they're in cahoots with the pharmaceutical drug companies, and they push this thing as being the only remedy, and this is how, and they make tremendous amounts of money.
Yeah.
And that's all real. This is not tinfoil hat, conspiracy wearing shit. That's real. But if you supported him because you thought that he was the science, and then over time you have realized that, oh my God, they did work with Peter Daszak, they did fund through another organization gain of function research. He did lie about it. It was talked about in emails. He did contact people who were saying one thing and had them change their position. He did. They did ridicule the lab leak theory when they knew it to be correct. They knew it. They knew they were doing the exact same research on the exact same viruses in that exact same place where it broke out. They knew it.
Right.
And they lied because they wanted to cover their ass, and we let them get away with it.
And by the way, you know, whatever. That's all I'll say.
By the way.
No, I mean, people don't say that because they're worried about getting punished. They're worried about
Right.
someone putting kiddie porn on their computer.
Right.
Members of Congress are terrified of the intel agencies. I'm not guessing at that. They've told me that, including people on the intel committee, including people who run the intel committee, the people whose job it is to oversee and keep in line these enormous, secretive agencies whose budgets we can't even know. They're black budgets. They're the parents. The agencies are the children. They're afraid of the agencies. That's not compatible with democracy. Democracy is a really simple system, even representative democracy like ours. The people rule. They do so through elections. They express their preference through voting. They send their people to the capital city to run the government on their behalf. Whenever you have unelected people who are not accountable to anyone making the biggest decisions, you don't have a democracy, you have something else, another system. I would call it a tyranny or whatever you want to call it. It's not a democracy. So that's like super obvious. It's playing out in front of everyone and no one cares and no one does anything about it. And I think the reason is because they're threatened. And if you look at the committee chairmen who allow this shit to happen year after year, they're all, and I don't know, people say, oh, they're compromised or being blackmailed or whatever. I don't have evidence of that, but I know them. And they all have things to hide. I know that for a fact. And so it's not a stretch of imagination to imagine that, you know, some committee chairman who's allowing warrantless spying on Americans to continue or whatever abuse they're allowing, knowing fully or hiding the truth about UAPs, ignoring the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, like, why are they doing that? It's not impossible to imagine that some guy with a drinking problem or a weird sex life, and that's very common up there, that's why they're doing it. Because they don't want to be exposed. I don't have evidence of that. I don't have proof of that.
Right.
But that's not a crazy thing to assume that could be happening. And I said to somebody, a very powerful person, the other day in a conversation in my kitchen, an elected official, holds a really senior position, a very famous person. I was going crazy. I was so mad about all this stuff and about the warrantless spying and about the funding for these insane wars. And I said to the guy who serves in one of the legislative bodies, I got so mad my dogs were afraid. They're like, well, why are you yelling? Because I don't yell at home. But I was like, all these people are controlled. They're all, you know, got weird sex lives and all these things are hiding and they're being blackmailed by the intel agencies. And he said, and I'm quoting, I know. was like, okay, so at this point we're just sort of admitting that's real? Like, why do we allow that to continue?
The having people compromise thing, God, that's an old story.
It's the oldest story.
J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, it's all of them. It's Epstein's Island. It's everything.
But look, I don't have any. I'm telling you, what's the phrase the finance guys use? Open kimono. Like, I'm actually telling you all I know. I don't know anything else.
Right.
But I know that the publicly available facts tell a really clear story, which is the government is not acting on behalf of the population. And so it's inherently illegitimate because its only legitimacy derives from the citizenry. The only reason the government can do things that it does, kill people, collect money by force, all the powers that it has, come from one place, and that's the consent of the governed. That's the only legitimacy they have.
And that's where it's fascinating, this concept of good and evil. Because when you think about it, if this is true, and if these people are compromised because they're secretly perverts and creeps.
They are, though.
And they're corrupt, and they steal money, or all these different things are evil things. Lying, controlling people, engaging in unnecessary wars that are going to cost thousands of lives for profit. All these things are evil things. So if evil is real, evil would want those kind of people to be in a position of power.
Yes. And
evil would want men to breastfeed their children.
Here's the here's the illusion that we fall for time and again. We imagine that evil comes like fully advertised as such. Like evil people look like Anton LaVey.
Horns,
yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Black cloak.
Exactly.
Sickle.
Evil is an independent force that exists outside of people, that acts upon people. I really believe that. I've experienced it a lot. And it's obvious. And what vessel do they choose? The weak. It's weak men and women who are instruments of evil. The weaker the leader, the more evil that leader will be.
For many of you, to the World Economic Forum headquarters, this is where the magic happens. And you are part of that magic. Feel the magic in these walls. Feel the magic that many leaders, many communities are bringing so that we can come together and create impact that we want in this world.
Who do you think I am?
You're Mr. Durden.
Why do people think that I'm you?
Why would anyone possibly confuse you with me?
Because we're the same person.
That's right.
Take one look in the mirror, implications so clear. I live life with no fear, except for the idea that one day you won't be here. I will not fetch the ball, eyes are green, I eat my vegetables. It has nothing to do with that broad, but if it did, guarantee she be gone. Well, I got a plan with the walk in the pen if you can't understand my heart.
You could be the master of your fate, you could be the captain of your soul, but you have to realize that life is coming from you and not at you.
Drake is obviously...
All I can do right now is put on a brave face and go out there and be their leader.
It's over.
Do you still kiss your fans?
We are screwed.
No, I stopped that. I think there's a
fuck you.
The glory days, man. You know, I miss it a lot.
I am gay. I like men.
I think.
Having some dark thoughts.
Yes, having some very dark thoughts about what's going on.
How did that change things for you?
That was the moment where I just felt that there is like less than a human.
What do you say to the skeptics?
My pain is unmatched, honestly.
In this battle with Kendrick Lamar, which lyrically, as far as the music seems to be over, nobody has dropped any music all week.
You know, so I'm very confident, and I say that with humility, but I'm very confident in who I am.
But Drake clearly is suffering the consequences at his house.
I take responsibility.
Not only was there the shooting the other day, he has a bodyguard who is still recovering.
Every not so funny joke.
But there was another incident yesterday. We'll get to that in a moment. But Drake posted something that clearly shows he is in a dark place.
Sometimes all you want is a big old juicy page.
Thinking the worst of what could happen here because they don't have a suspect yet in the shooting. And so he doesn't know, we don't know what the motive was.
For people to dig up Mama's grave and do pee on her?
Oh, God.
That ain't right.
of that person who decided to open fire.
Injuring one of his security guards. I mean, seriously.
And so in the absence of knowing what that person's motive is.
The president was shooting bombs overseas, yet I'm a bad guy because I've sang some rock and roll songs. And who's a bigger influence, the president or Marilyn Manson? Do you know? I'd like to think me, but I'm gonna go with the president.
Okay, what's the truth?
I'm tired.
Tired of what?
I mean, I can safely say it is not about disagreements over Israel.
Everything.
Me too, but I'm still here, and I'm not tired every day. I wake up, I'm not happy, and I'm an empty soul, but I'm still fighting in life to go, to be proud, have kids, make them proud one day, try to read books. I go to the gym. I don't have a perfect life. Look what I'm doing with my life. I'm talking to you.
That is funny content.
I'm sure his mind is just wandering, thinking the worst.
Why wouldn't you call someone a nick? I don't think that's racist. It's just a really good insult.
And he posted this clip from a Netflix series called A Man in Full, and it is a very, you've seen it, I haven't seen it yet, but this is a very dark thought that is going through the main character's mind here, and Drake posted this particular scene.
I like men.
Maybe I do. But when you die, when people want you, I know there will be a lot of memories of me by a lot of people. Many even pavement, even so. A person used to live with bear, but mine was born.
This is the opening scene of the whole show. It sort of sets the framework that he's lying there dead as the main character, and then it flashes back. But it shows that Drake is thinking about death. I mean, this is what it frames that show. There's been people who have come to his house, a drive-by shooting that injures his security guard. He's had this other incident that you mentioned where a trespasser tried to gain access, said he was there to see Drake.
Right, walked right up and said that he was there to see Drake, and police obviously showed up. This person was arrested for trespassing.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't know exactly why he posted it, but Drake does know all eyes are on him. Any little thing that he posts, everybody's going to eat up. You know, some people think he's looking for sympathy, you know, after the Kendrick Lamar beef. Some people do think he's thinking about death, but...
Bottom line is, no one's going to get in trouble. Nobody should feel sad at all.
Also, the character in the show that he's depicting, it's about, the character getting back on his enemies of the people who, ruined his empire. So maybe Drake.
I guess that's the positive way to spin on this. That
Drake is spinning it. Maybe he feels like the underdog now. Now he can, lick his chops and make a grand comeback.
Maybe, or he's also, that character is sort of an anti-hero at best. He's the main character, but he's sort of a villain. And I don't think Drake has really experienced being the villain. He's been a star for so long, and now...
And they found you amusing for a while. The people of this city. But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
Kendrick has really called into question whether he fits in culture and so forth, and he's just sort of dealing with it live on sort of Instagram.
He's sharing his thoughts, cryptically or not so cryptically, by posting this stuff. As for the trespasser, again, nothing violent happened this time, but it's another incident that has to have Drake and his staff thinking, what's going on at this house? Is it safe to stay at this house, even though it is this massive mansion behind gates?
What the fuck is a diss track? And why the fuck would anyone care? If someone had lyrical skills and they're a rapper and they're gonna make rhymes about me saying that my fucking hair's thin or my nose is crooked, are you fucking joking? If you're the type of person worrying about a diss track, then you should fucking develop some real problems to understand what actual hardship is. There are people out here dying of fucking cancer. Well, this rapper made these words and it was fire. Diss tracks, don't even waste my fucking time. So apparently there's been some new diss track. Everyone's like, man, if Eminem hits you with a diss track, man, Eminem doesn't pull his punches. His diss tracks are crazy. Eminem made a diss track about Donald Trump. He's about to win the next election. Who gives a shit? Diss tracks are the stupidest shit I've ever heard of in my life. but it obviously made someone ask a fucking question. I'm not scared of diss tracks. Been diss tracked. Fucking human trafficker. Are you joking? I'm bored of it by now.
There will come a payday, hallelujah, what a payday. There will come a payday someday, someday. There will come a payday, hallelujah, what a payday. There will come a payday someday. When I lay my work by, I've a home in the sky. For there will come a payday someday, where no interest comes due or notes to renew. Oh, there will come a payday someday. Here I work every day for such bigger pay, but there will come a payday someday. And the title's not clear to the home I own here, but there will come a payday someday. There will come a payday, hallelujah, what a payday. There will come a payday someday, someday. There will come a payday, hallelujah.
Look, you're wasting our time. You're not going to get us to not believe in evolution.
And why is that?
Because the smartest scientists in the entire world all agree that it's real.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because, Mr. Reynolds, science is a liar sometimes.
Oh, boy.
This is Aristotle, thought to be the smartest man on the planet. He believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and everybody believed him because he was so smart. Until another smartest guy came around, Galileo, and he disproved that theory, making Aristotle and everybody else on Earth look like a bitch. Of course, Galileo then thought comets were an optical illusion, and there's no way that the moon could cause the ocean's tides. Everybody believed that because he was so smart. He was also wrong, making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch again. And then, best of all, Sir Isaac Newton gets born and blows everybody's nips off with his big brains. Of course, he also thought he could turn metal into gold and died eating mercury, making him yet another stupid bitch. Are you seeing a pattern?
No.
Mr. Reynolds, these were all the smartest scientists on the planet. Only problem is, they kept being wrong. Sometimes.
Oh, this is insane, you fool!
I'm a fool because I have more faith in the saints that wrote the Bible?
Yeah, because you just read the words of a bunch of guys that you never met, and you just take it on faith that everything they wrote was true.
And what makes you think what your scientists are writing is any more truer than my saints?
Because there are volumes of proven data, numbers, you know, figures. There are fossil records.
Oh, fossil records. Ah! I didn't even think about the fossil records. I guess I'll concede. Oh, wait, one more thing before I do, Mr. Reynolds. Have you seen these fossil records?
Have I? Huh?
Have you poured through the data yourself? The numbers, the figures?
Well, no. No.
Oh, interesting. So let me get this straight, Mr. Reynolds. You get your information from a book written by men you've never met, and you take their words as truth based on a willingness to believe, a desire to accept, a leap of, dare I say it, faith?
Come on. Look, I mean, I don't even know how I'm supposed to respond to that. Like, come on. That's a false equivalency.
Just answer the question, Mr. Reynolds.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I rest my case.
Oh, that got me. Yeah.
Frank, do you want me to?
Put me over.
Yeah, all right.
What?
Well, we're going to the fence. I mean, that's a shadow of a doubt.
You actually don't believe in evolution anymore?
I don't know. He created a reasonable doubt. He makes you sound like a stupid science bitch.
Yeah, he got you good.
Oh, my God.
I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law.